Hello and welcome back to the Inspirathon 2023. So excited that you're here with us. We have a wonderful next speaker coming up. Her name is Helene Williamson, and she is the Global People and Culture Director at All Saints. And All Saints is a global fashion retailer, and basically talent retention and a young workforce has been part of their biggest challenge with that entire workplace. And Helen's talk is retaining our Gen Z workforce from Sherpas to the Spice Girls. And she's going to share some of All Saints' learnings. It's from the key KPIs for success to what the Spice Girls can teach us about recruitment and diversity, and how All Saints amplified the CEO's value-based approach to build an inspiring culture. So I want to welcome Helene and let her take over, and we'll have a great talk from her.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Karen. Lovely introduction. So I'm Helene. I'm the Global People and Culture Director at All Saints. And as Karen said, you may or may not be kind of familiar with All Saints. So a bit about us. So we're a global fashion brand founded in Shoreditch in East London in 1994, so not yet 30. And we employ about 2,200 people in 13 countries, so very global. Our three biggest markets are the UK, where we started, and then followed by North America and Taiwan. About 70% of our workforce works in a store, and our average age is even younger than All Saints itself. So our average age is 26. So it really is that Gen Z workforce that dominates. And we're an incredibly diverse brand. So we're very lucky to be more female than male across the board, including at board level. So more female than male directors, and that's been really inspiring to be a part of such a diverse culture and board. Over 20% of us identify as LGBTQ+, and over 40% of us as Black, Indigenous, or people of colour. So hugely diverse in terms of background, in terms of gender diversity, in terms of sexual orientation. But on average, still quite young. So that tells you a little bit about what we're dealing with. And we, I guess, probably not dissimilar to sort of many of the people in our sector. Probably our biggest sort of talent challenge over the last few years has been, how do we sort of retain that young workforce globally, and also I guess people have very different kind of views of what a career in a store is like. But, I think for us, it's also been about, how do we make sure that those careers really feel meaningful, and that they are careers, not just jobs, if that's what our workforce wants. So today's talk is very much kind of practical. So the problem we've been facing, and a bit about our approach and how we've tackled it. So hopefully that's what you've tuned in for. But in terms of kind of why that talent retention is a problem for us, we estimate that it costs us around £2,500. So that's about $2,800 for US dollar people. And in the last year, we lost about 1,400 of our 2,200 employees. So that's a cost of around £3 million or $3.5 million a year. So I guess our kind of pitch to the board was, we believe that we can really, if by investing in our people experience and making some changes to culture and development, we believe that we can kind of dramatically reduce those numbers by about 50% by 2025 and fulfill our overall business ambitions at the same time. And in terms of how we do that, this is kind of our overall sort of talent goal. So this goal was actually set by Pete, our CEO, and it's one of 4 sort of strategic imperatives that drive our business. So building a talent utopia, and then the other 3 are focused on marketing, supply chain, and business expansion. Very much with a view that we're a growing business, we're ambitious, and that building a talent utopia is kind of one of the most sort of important aspects of how we achieve our overall ambitions for growth. So what does that actually mean? So Talent Utopia for us is creating a place to work that nobody thought was possible, having our talent absolutely joined up with our brand, And I guess in terms of what we mean by that, there's a few different sort of aspects to that. So I think communication is super important. So, you know, knowing what's happening, feeling like you're a part of it, feeling like you belong from a diversity and inclusion point of view is obviously really important there as well. And also feeling inspired. So feeling inspired by our leadership, and you know, regardless of kind of what part of the business you work in, and whether that's in a store, in a distribution center, or, you know, designing our clothing in our studios in East London, whatever you do and kind of wherever you are in the world, feeling like you can find inspiration, and you can find a place where you belong. For those of you that were just listening to kind of what Karen was talking about, I think she's absolutely right when she sort of talks about um, EQ, and also that kind of culture being so important in terms of what keeps us working in a brand. I think, you know, if you ask most people at All Saints what they love about working here, they'll tell you it's the people they work with. But I guess what we're really describing there is what Karen described, right? So it's that connection to each other, but also feeling valued and appreciated. So the shift that we needed to make as leaders, we kind of wrapped into one big project. So we called it Project Amazing because we're nothing if not ambitious at All Saints. And these were the kind of 5 key sort of strands that we talked to our leaders about. So creating a world-class working environment. Retailers have a tendency to think about numbers first rather than people. Also, I guess in retail, we're often dealing with part-time roles. So, you know, a big part of the conversation that we had is that we wanted, if work is a relationship, then we wanted to be a better boyfriend to our teams. So we wanted to, you know, show up when we said we would. Offer them the same commitment as they are offering us. So, you know, if you're contracted to 16 hours a week, but we're sometimes asking you to do 32 and sometimes 16, that doesn't feel like we're really committed to you. So we wanted to make sure that we were, you know, calling when we said we would, showing up in the way that we said we would, and that we were consistent with what we were offering in terms of commitment level and what we were asking. Um, Time off is an investment in retaining talent, not a pain in the butt. A big part of, I guess, what we wanted to address and change is that we knew that part of what we wanted to do to improve retention of our workforce is to change our age mix, and attract a more mature and retain a more mature team member. In order to do that, we had to kind of go back to basics in terms of um, how we manage like rotas, scheduling, and the conversation that we had with our leaders is that a more mature team has life commitments. You know, it could be childcare, could be they've got stuff going on outside of work, but they will stay longer if we meet them with flexibility. And that's been an absolute game changer for us in terms of being able to, for example, attract and retain more working parents just through simple things like consistent shift patterns, getting schedules up earlier. Um, our leaders deserve face-to-face, one-to-one connection with us regularly. So I think through the pandemic, we all became very, very comfortable with virtual tools. And in particular, I guess a lot of work was done by instant message. So we again kind of really re-emphasized that kind of face-to-face, get to know you connection. And I think, you know, the conversation that we had was that, you know, our best coaching conversations very rarely happen on a chat message. So that kind of one-to-one, really show me you know me, has been incredibly important as a behavior change for our leaders. Our store visits are for the team, not the product. So again, you know, saying to leaders when we're visiting a store, we're not there to see how the dresses look, we're there to see how the team are. So really emphasizing that, you know, when we are visiting, that that's really about building connections with each member of the team. Not a sort of product performance pop quiz, but really kind of, how are you, what do you want to do, what feedback do you have for us, what opportunities are there. And you know, I think the sort of 5th point there, I guess, is if we're delivering an amazing experience, you can expect amazing performance from your employees as well. So utopia worthy leadership isn't about giving teams everything they want, it's about building that candid relationship that allows us to develop them based on two-way feedback and high standards. And in terms of kind of how big a shift that was, I think some of that's needed quite a bit of kind of learning development and sort of culture intervention. And some of that's come very naturally. I think you'll probably find that if you're considering making similar shifts or changes to your employee experience, that actually you'll have leaders that behave like this naturally. And it's also about, I think, one of my sort of best tips is probably find those leaders that are ambassadors for this already and really amplify and sort of show off what they do to the rest of the organization, because that can be a real driver for change. It's very different when we see it demonstrated to when the people team tells us we should be doing something. So I promised to tell you about the Spice Girls, and I am going to come through. Leading in 2023, when we kind of think about generational gaps in leadership, a lot of us came up maybe working for Boomer or Gen X, or even millennial leaders. And I guess what we've learned about leading in 2023 is that leadership needs to be much more like the Spice Girls. And what I mean by that is the Spice Girls is a band with no frontman. So actually any of the spices can do it, and there is a spice for everybody. I think you can kind of find your fit in that team, but probably I would hope most of you would have a favorite Spice Girl. Mine obviously is Ginger, but I think for us, really helping to kind of think about leadership as something that affects the whole team, culture as something that affects the whole team, and actually really encouraging that it's a group of people doing it together, but they're not all the same. Actually, that everyone brings their own identity to the party. And I guess just to clarify, there is absolutely space in our leadership model for Spice boys and Spice non-binary people. I appreciate they're not maybe the most diverse example, but they are my favorite, so I couldn't resist. So yeah, this kind of principle of anyone can lead, and that actually what our teams want from us is more coaching and less front manning or kind of dragging a team behind you. And also we know that it's incredibly important that our teams feel like they share a purpose with their leader. So to achieve utopia, there was sort of two things that we knew we needed. So trust and psychological safety, which Karen obviously spoke about a little bit earlier, but also a huge amount of constant change because we're not yet at utopia. And those of you who have cottoned on that utopia is an imagined state of perfect bliss will know that actually we're probably always going to be on the journey to utopia. There's no sort of moment where you cross the finish line with this. But that those two things really do need to remain in balance for us to be able to kind of effectively change our proposition. So we've spoken to leaders a lot about how to build that trust. We really emphasize listening. DEI is employee led at All Saints, and a big part of our role is just tuning into those groups in the organization and really being there to listen and make sure that they kind of get heard at a board level, so that we are really building and creating that sort of trust and psychological safety for people. And yeah, I think that kind of balance can be quite tricky to maintain. There's probably times when we've got that right and times when we've got it wrong. But that is our aim, is for those two things to kind of to stay in balance. Okay. So I spoke about purpose earlier, and I think there's a few different ways that we've kind of talked to our people about this. So the first, and I think this always helps me as well, but the first thing we talk about is, why did you choose the role that you're in? So why All Saints? Why being a leader at All Saints? How did you feel on your first day, and how do you kind of connect back to that first day feeling? And then, we like to say, we're not a retailer, we're in the business of feelings. And I guess what that means is that, we believe, and what kind of gets us out of bed in the morning as a brand is, we believe that actually a new outfit can be transformative in terms of how confident we feel. And we talk to our teams a lot, not just about making sure that the product. Like, we sell 30 different leather jackets, and there's a huge amount of sort of specialist knowledge that goes into being able to being able to present that offering to the customer. But what's really important to us, and I guess the thing we look for when we recruit, because it's much more difficult to train, is do people have the kind of competency of starting starting a conversation with a stranger? So actually the ability to quickly build rapport and to understand how they're feeling, and to sort of try and change that where you can. But also actually what an enormous privilege it can be to do our job. So actually, one of the sort of most amazing things about working in a store is you can affect someone's feelings and someone's confidence. And we talk about buying the shirt for the first date, or the blazer for the job interview, or we've even had people come to us for white dresses to wear to their weddings. And actually how amazing it is to be able and to have the privilege of being able to be part of those moments and those feelings. Like, that's a big part of our purpose as a brand. So overall, in terms of kind of what we've learned from Project Amazing, we know that our people are self-motivated when they're given the freedom to do the work they enjoy, when they're able to control what they do, when they do it, and how they go about doing it. And that is quite a shift, I guess, from what you might think of as a sort of traditional retail job. But that's the sort of direction of travel for us, is having variety, having control over their career path, and having the flexibility to tell us when they do and don't want to work, and see their potential as unlimited, and constantly seek to improve their skills through learning and practice. So we talk a lot about developing a growth mindset, and that's a massive part of our culture, is that sort of openness to feedback and challenge, but also making sure that there's the coaching and support there, that actually this can be a place where you do really improve your skills through learning and practice. And then I guess the kind of final bit that we know is really important is understanding and sort of being invested in the bigger picture. So transparency is a massive part of how we want to operate as a board. So everything from we publish our diversity and inclusion numbers every year alongside our gender pay gap reporting, which we don't have to do, but we think it's really important. We'll publish how we're doing on our sustainability commitments, how many of our products have a sustainable attribute, what those attributes are, and that's something that we carry into the business as well. So really regular communication, regular updates is really important. So that's something that we've really learned through this journey, is how important it can be to really be clear, and to make sure that everybody kind of knows what part they can play. So not just this is the goal, but actually how do I contribute to that, or where do I fit in? So regardless of whether you're processing payroll or working in a store, this is the impact that you can have. So that's been really important to us. And in terms of how it's going, I think, as I said, it's a journey that has no end. But what I can tell you is, in the sort of 12 months that we've been working on this, we've seen a 23% reduction in our labour turnover. So it is a journey that's really worth going on, in my view. And I think if it's something that you're thinking about in terms of sort of improving the employee experience, we really can see in our sort of hard metrics that is really paying off. So we're really delighted to see that. And I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to share with you guys. So I hope that was useful, and yeah, it would be great to hear any thoughts.
Hi, Helen. I loved your talk. It's so nice and refreshing to see actual, like, a company that's doing the journey, doing the work, and you can see the tangible results. Have you found, I mean, is management open to this? Obviously they are, because they're doing this, but was there resistance in the beginning, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I said you'll find leaders that are kind of natural advocates, and leaders probably that are a bit more skeptical. And I think, like most organizations, we do have a generation gap, right? So we've got members of our board that are not Gen Z, and actually are probably, examples of leaders who came up behind someone that was kind of more autocratic and that maybe wasn't about letting the whole team lead. So yeah, I think, in terms of kind of what that journey has looked like, we have we've done two things. So the first is we've asked for the trust. We've been incredibly lucky in that we've had really good CEO support as well, and I think that makes a huge difference. So finding that senior sponsor for the work, I think, is super important and helpful. So yeah, asking for that trust, I think, has been really helpful. And then I guess the other bit that I would say has been really useful is, I sort of spoke about it briefly earlier, but it's finding the leaders that are already doing it and really sort of making a fuss of them in the best possible way. So, really sharing that, sort of talking through, how they've done it, what challenges they've found, but really having those metrics ready to go as well. I think, particularly for your more skeptical stakeholders, being able to sort of say that the proof is in the pudding, makes it very, very difficult to say no.
Yeah, it's interesting because over the years, when I've worked so much with HR, it's like you've got to have the languaging that top leaders understand. So, I mean, that you can make it so concrete. You've reduced the staff turnover by 20 or by 23%, right? That's what you said.
Yeah.
That's great, and that actually shows kind of a result that you can have. Was it natural for you guys to work with purpose and things like that, or was that something that you like intentionally brought in?
It's a good question. So I think a lot of it resonated with people from day one, but maybe hadn't been articulated to them in that way. So I think, if you spoke to them about what they loved and what got them out of bed, a lot of them would have said, it's interaction with customers. But whether they would have said to you, it's the privilege of being able to change how someone feels, maybe not in that specific way. So I think I guess a lot of our craft is to kind of put the kind of language or concept around a sort of cloud of stuff that could be quite nebulous.
I think you've just shared such a great example with so much of your staff being Gen Z, because I know that older generations have a hard time with them. I mean, I've heard so many times, like, how do we manage these people? And I mean, it's
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. But I mean, listen, the reality is they're not going away, right? So, I mean,
no.
I think,
Exactly.
the other thing is, I think, we've said to our leaders, you don't have to agree with everything, but this is what they expect, and the kind of consequence of not being there to meet them at least part of the way in that expectation is actually that you won't be able to attract and keep the best. So I think, for me, it was a sort of point earlier, but actually one of the big things that we were able to say to our leaders is, it isn't just about giving Gen Z everything that, quote, they demand. It is actually about saying, if you're delivering an amazing experience, you can expect amazing results, right? And I think that's been a real unlock for us as well, is that it is a two-way process, right? So I think what tends to make people uncomfortable, is, it's like, oh, well, they want this and they want that. And I think actually being able to say, well, actually, if we're delivering a better proposition, you can also expect better results. I think that's again, very difficult to argue with.
It's almost like you have to be, I don't know if you feel this way, but kind of the bridge between the two mindsets of, the younger generation coming in and what they want, and the older generations that are just like, well, we've always done it this way, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, you're dead right. My team always joke that I've always got on the other hand. So I think, that finding that balance is really, really important.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to come and share and, like I said, give a good case study. I think this is very insightful for so many people, and especially because, like I had mentioned, 75% of the workforce is these Gen Z. So
Mhm.
you're living it, you're doing it, and it's great to be able to shine the spotlight on companies that are doing things like that. Is there any last tidbit of advice you would have for people working in HR that could help them in kind of their own journeys?
Oh gosh, great question. I would say, connect to your purpose first. So I think, before you start thinking about what everybody else's is, make sure you're really clear. I mean, I think often, we carry some of the biggest kind of emotional load through these processes. So I think, being really clear with yourself and with your own team about what gets you out of bed and what do you want to achieve and accomplish, I think can be really helpful before you kind of plow into trying to shape that for the rest of the organization.
great advice. Definitely. We're so aligned on so many things. It was like our talks totally overlapped. So that was
Absolutely.
great.
We didn't compare notes before, guys, just so you know.
No. So that was fun. But thank you so much, Helen, and good luck with everything. And I'm going to
My
be keeping an
pleasure.
eye on you guys, and hopefully, you can share some more insights in some future events as well.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.